but just keep moving in. Keep moving in. And we've got to remember why we're here. We're here because there's a great injustice being done to men and women that served in Northern Ireland. They have been slandered. They have been called out as all sorts of things, even by that rabble round the corner there. Well, first of all, we're not racist, because most of us in the units that served in Northern Ireland served with people of all religions and all races. So it's a scandal for them to get away with calling us racist.
Free the Mitchams, free!
And we will call them out on it, and we will call them to account. But we're here for our comrades that have been dragged through the legal system in Northern Ireland, and we're going to stand here and keep standing here until the job is done and until their names are cleared and they are free to go and free to walk the streets without fear of arrest or prosecution. I want to introduce our good friend Mike Hookham. Mike is a veteran. Mike is a patriot, and Mike represents one of the only parties in this country, in fact the only mainstream party in this country that really cares about veterans. Give it up for Mike Hookham, Deputy Leader of UKIP.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we are on. Thank you very much. I'm sorry I'm at the age now where my memory's going, so I have to read stuff. Yeah, for those who served in the forces, often describe the bonds we share as like being part of a family. And like all families, it's at times of adversity the bonds of true solidarity and brotherhood are put to the test. That is why it fills me with such pride to see so many of you here today. For it's our experiences, our common cause, and our loyalty that bonds us together like few other groups. And it proves that it's not only the Provisional IRA who can live by the motto, once in, never out. No words can reflect the random brutality of the fighting, nor the mental and physical scars that veterans took away from the conflict in Northern Ireland, and often carry to this day. And whether you call it the Troubles, the conflict, or Operation Banner, what happened in Northern Ireland was nothing less than war. And war is a dirty, brutal business, whatever definition you give it. And in nearly 40 years, the Troubles in Northern Ireland claimed more than 3,500 lives. Over half of the casualties were civilian, due in main to the guerrilla tactics employed by the terrorist organisations involved. However, of the combatants, for every paramilitary killed, 2 members of the armed forces and security services lost their lives. And while I mourn every member of our brave armed forces who lost their life, I remain utterly unapologetic for the deaths of terrorists. These were people who were taking it upon themselves to take up arms and force a political change. The majority of people in Northern Ireland did not want. These people were not freedom fighters, nor were they heroes. Instead, they were anti-democratic criminal insurgents who thought nothing of killing and maiming soldiers and civilians alike to further their ends. In times of war, those who live by the sword often die by the sword. Therefore, any terrorist killed got what they deserved, in my book.
Absolutely.
Yes. However, despite having won the peace in Northern Ireland, it would seem our brotherhood eventually lost the war. Rather than being thanked for their dedication, professionalism and service, veterans today fear a knock at the door and being scrutinised over events a lifetime ago. From where I'm standing, the odds of being targeted in this post-conflict witch hunt are growing. And now it seems it could happen to anyone who's ever seen active service. Despite a public outcry over the historical prosecution of veterans and a few MPs asking for an amnesty, the Tory government is still debating the establishment of a new historical investigations unit for Northern Ireland. And don't think for a second that the Labour Party will help. At a recent debate in the House of Commons on this issue of veteran prosecutions, only one Labour MP bothered to show up. And that was because he was a shadow minister responsible and he had to be there. As for the Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn, a man who has sympathised with violent republicanism by refusing time and again to condemn the IRA. A man who invited IRA representatives to the Commons a fortnight after the Brighton bombing. A man who stood for a moment's silence for IRA terrorists killed in an SAS ambush. And let's not even mention Corbyn's support for Islamic terror groups such as Hamas and Hezbollah, or his belief that IS supporters in the UK should not be arrested. In my view, these prosecutions are nothing more than a continuation of the conflict by other means, but with the scales of justice weighed in the favour of terrorism. So I ask you, what is the good of applying a rose-tinted rotoscope to events of 30 or 40 years ago? What possible good can it do? Persecuting veterans does nothing more than open old wounds at a time when sensible people would be looking to the future and building on the very tentative peace we achieved in Northern Ireland. However, instead of promoting peace for all involved, the UK justice system has once again hefted its right on politically correct weight behind investigating and potentially prosecuting old men who have bravely fought for their country at the behest of a government of today. There is just no justice in a one-sided witch hunt, and that is why these investigations must end. Under the terms of the Good Friday Agreement, up to 500 terrorists walked free from prison. Many of those released had committed heinous crimes, yet we were told it was necessary to build goodwill, as peace could only be attained through compromise. But today that compromise is a one-way street that allows terrorists to walk free, while former soldiers acting under orders face prosecution and jail. So where will it end, you ask? The simple fact is, it won't end until we force it to stop. First, it was investigations into the actions of British troops in Iraq, many of which proved to be false. Then it was a turn of veterans from the conflict in Northern Ireland. And now the can of worms has been opened on other historical conflicts. They've come under the microscope, including the actions of British troops in Cyprus, dating back to the 1950s. How long will it be before we start seeing investigations into all the other places Britain's armed forces have served in the last 50 years? We've already seen one terminally ill veteran, Dennis Hutchings.
Go Dennis!
He's been charged with attempted murder, despite being cleared on numerous occasions of any wrongdoing over the last 40 years. Dennis has been investigated by the standards of civilians who have no conception of what it's like to serve, and charged, even though most of the witnesses to the incident are dead. But this treatment of veterans, people who served and protected this country by laying their lives on the line, is symptomatic of a broader disregard for our brotherhood. And all too often today, instead of being lauded as heroes, veterans are thrown to the wolves and decried by parts of society pushing their own agenda. And this pattern is repeated in many aspects of veteran care, with governments, councils and services choosing not to implement the rights of veterans given to them under the Armed Forces Covenant. It's a disgrace, and one I'm committed to tackling head on. So here today, I will make a promise to the UK's 5 million veterans and their families that I will not rest until we no longer see veterans sleeping on the streets. Until veterans can access critical medical care and counselling, some may need to rebuild their lives in Civvy Street. Until the armed forces and community covenant is not only made fit for purpose, but also implemented across the nation with the spirit of reward it's intended. And until veterans no longer face the threat of prosecution and imprisonment for doing their jobs and protecting the realm. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike Cookham. And I just want to add to that. I genuinely believe UKIP is the only party in this country, the only major party that has the potential to change things for us veterans. I'm going to say this: support UKIP, vote UKIP, join UKIP, put these people into government. And Al-Weir is going to be speaking on on behalf of a very, very good friend of Northern Ireland veterans. Let's have a round of applause for Mr. Robin Horsfall. Mr. Robin Horsfall.
6 soldiers committed suicide this week. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that. Richard, shut up. Why are they committing suicide?
Ladies and gentlemen, we're here to hear Robin Horsfall speaks. The point our friend just made about the soldiers committing suicide is extremely valid, and it's something that we're addressing as a group of people. But we're here to hear Robin's speech. Robin fought in the Iranian embassy siege. He was one of the first men to storm into that building. Robin Horsfall is a hero. He is suffering from cancer at the minute, and we've got a good friend in this movement, Alistair Weir, to come and read his speech on his behalf. Give him a good round of applause.
Thank you. Just before, I'd like to say I didn't actually serve due to knee operations. I was a handy cadet though, but I did want to serve, but my knees let me down. But I've always supported our lads, and especially you veterans. So I'd just like to lead into Robin's speech. Apologies for his absence. He's fighting another battle today, which is cancer. He hopes to see you again by the end of the year. And as Richard has said, all our best to Robin. So, let's talk about freedom. There is no freedom without the forces to protect that freedom. For the past 3 years, you and I have been rallying, marching and protesting. Robin has delivered 2 letters to the Prime Minister, 2 among many. The first a simple protest, the second a well-researched argument that claimed that your human rights were breached. And as you know what happened? Foxtrot Alpha. Why? Because this government fears the IRA and they don't fear you. In return for the sacrifice of a few old soldiers, the government hopes to keep the IRA from returning to their murderous ways and methods. You don't need reminding of those methods, but just to recap: tarring and feathering young women, kidnapping, murder, the mutilation of bodies, the torture of captured prisoners, bombs in bars, waste bins, bandstands and family buses. These gangsters have no limits, and yet the conflict in Northern Ireland, the British government quite rightly insists on holding the moral high ground in spite of your casualties and the general public's casualties. You knew who the terrorists were and where they lived, but did not resort to their evil methods, despite the desire of many of you to do so. Theresa May talks about proportionality, as if the IRA is entitled the same treatment as the British soldier. Mrs May, if you truly believe in proportionality, perhaps the British soldier should kill 3,000 IRA supporters just to bring the casualty figures back into some form of proportional equality. That is, of course, a foolish idea, but it shows what words like proportionality can actually mean. She says our veterans will be treated fairly. She cannot see the truth, and she has forgotten what the truth is. Without truth, her government has no future. But what is the alternative to Mrs May? Corbyn. A man who has said he never met the IRA. But there are published photographs of him attending IRA funerals, chatting to McGuinness and Adams. The truth. They can't handle the truth. Well, it's time for the truth to rise up and bite them in the bloody arse. So what can you do? How can you make those lily-livered cowards in the Houses of Parliament sit up and listen? You and me have done the bans and the marches. We have written to dozens of MPs. There are dozens of responses from MPs from both the Conservative and the Labour Party. The interesting thing about these letters is that most of them use exactly the same sentences. Some could be carbon copies. This tells us, you and me, that both leading political parties have some kind of agreement in this matter. It doesn't matter what the law says. The government and the IRA both ignore the law. It doesn't matter how many times we march, they will ignore you and us. How can they ignore you? Aren't there more than 4 million veterans in the UK? That's a force to be reckoned with. No, because very clever people ensure that you argue amongst yourselves. They plant doubt in the minds and force you to be defensive. They divide and rule. Parliament is full of lily-livered cowards who are selling veterans and soldiers down the river. You must unify. You must come together and start a war, not with war of bombs and bullets, but a war of words and votes. We must attack them where it hurts the most. Local elections, by-elections and general elections. Some seats in Parliament are held by majorities of less than 3,000. We must kick them in the ballot box. We need to steel ourselves and go over the top. We need to stand as candidates. We must unify and we must organise. All veterans groups must follow a flag that represents servicemen and women. A flag that represents determination and commitment. A flag that is about decency and fair play. It is time for all to raise their game. There may be some who feel they don't have much time left, but they can start the fight, and younger men, like me, can finish it. The promised land is not some golden age in the past. The promised land is in the future. If we want a land where men and women live together with respect and kindness, then we must treat one another with respect and kindness. If we want a land where the poor and the old are cared for, then we had better start caring for one another. If we want a land where veterans cannot be cast into the hands of filthy, murdering gangsters, we had better ensure that we protect them after and during their service. If we want a land where government puts its own people first, then we must put ourselves on the line. We must all stand up and fight, not just for ending of this charade of law that puts our troops in court, especially Dennis Hutchins, but we must stand up to politicians who allow this to happen. How many of them have been soldiers? Not many. How many of them try to live on a taxed military pension? None. How many of them worry about paying the rent? None. Millions wasted on people who receive more in expenses than most of us will ever receive in wages. You were all soldiers, and damn bloody good ones. You went to war to defend me and our own people in Ulster and the Falklands. You defended our allies in Bosnia, Afghanistan and Iraq. Our men and women are still out there carrying weapons of self-defense that could result in them going to prison if they use them. No one asks a tornado pilot who his bombs killed in Iraq. No one asks a Navy captain who he killed with his cruise missile. No. But when an infantry soldier is 50 metres from a violent mob, and a sniper opens up from behind the crowd, he has to count his bullets and go to court to explain himself to lawyers who get paid from yours, mine, and our own taxes to put you away. Churchill said, jaw, jaw, not war, war. But that didn't mean he wasn't prepared to go to war against evil. The evil is Sinn Féin and the weak government in Westminster. The shadows are falling across Britain. We are stuck in a self-perpetuating system of Conservative and Labour governments. You and me, we have to change that. And we will do it with unity. From unity comes strength, and with strength we can change the future. The acorn doesn't worry about the great oaks. It reaches for the sky. We are the acorn, and we are going to grow. We are going to split the great oaks, and we are going to create a better future for our people. You can join the party, join the Veterans and People's Party, and help the acorn grow. Just to finish, do you remember how you felt on a big parade when you were all in step to the drum under the command of the RSM? Do you remember how you felt when you sang your songs in the mess and the naffy? Do you remember that unity, that power? Do you remember how good it felt to know that someone had your back on the streets and in Downing Street? That's the power of the soldier, the power of the veteran, the power of the people. So get out there at the next local election and vote, vote, vote. Members of Parliament and local councils, we are coming for you. We are coming for your seats, and we will not retreat. And I'd just like to finish. Be veterans still, to veterans true, among yourselves united. For nothing more than a veteran's voice will a veteran's wrongs be righted. Thank you.